yards, one single game. In Week 4 of 2016, Julio Jones did what only 5 other receivers have ever done before. As one of the most dominant receiving threats of all time, he had arguably his career-defining moment against the Panthers. In a season where the Falcons went on to finish as the 8th highest scoring offense ever and went to the Super Bowl for the first time in 20 years, this historically significant performance early in the season set a tone that this Falcons team was different. Understanding what happened in a football game is like solving a giant puzzle. Against the Panthers, Julio proved to be an extremely valuable piece of that puzzle, but there are 100 different pieces that need to fit in just as well. As football often is, it's not just Julio's dominance or Matt Ryan unleashing weekly MVP performances, but the circumstances and context surrounding the entire game. It's the matchups, the coverages, the offensive and defensive game plans, past week and season tendencies, and sometimes just a little bit of luck. Julio could go for 300 any week, so what made Week 4 2016 so different? To decipher how all this went down, we need to revisit what happened in Weeks 1 through 3. Julio actually had one of the slowest starts of his career, and in those 3 games, he had just 10 catches for 186 yards. In Week 3 against the Saints, possibly due to toe and back injuries, he was held to just 1 catch for 16 yards. His poor production didn't factor into the final outcome, thanks to the Falcons rushing for 217 yards in a 45-32 victory. Heading into Week 4, the Panthers studied and studied that film. They saw the explosive rushing attack and deemed the ground game priority 1, not Julio Jones. The Panthers themselves were just coming off a Super Bowl loss to the Broncos. In the offseason, they lost star cornerback Josh Norman to free agency and tried to replace him by drafting several rookie corners. Their plan to stop the Falcons' running backs centered around an increase in blitzes to plug up the gaps and relentlessly attack the backfield. They blitzed more than 50% of the time and figured a hobbled Julio could be taken care of with isolated one-on-one coverages. They were right about one thing. He was hobbled with a back injury and only played 70% of the snaps. But what they didn't account for was just how damn freaking good those snaps would be. He got going very quickly. On the first 3 plays of the game, he had 3 targets, 3 catches, and 51 yards. This was the first play called. When dissecting a Kyle Shanahan game plan, the Falcons' offensive coordinator at the time, you have to understand how he sets up defenses and specific defenders by pairing plays. All coaches script the first 15 plays of the game, but Shanahan is excellent at weaponizing those plays later on. This is a mirrored route concept, meaning both receivers run the same route. It's what Shanahan calls a run-back route, which is similar to a comeback. Keep this concept in mind because it will be used against the corners later in the episode. As the first quarter progressed, Panthers rookie cornerback James Bradberry, who was originally assigned to guard Julio, left the game with a toe injury, so the other rookie corner, Daryl Worley, received an unfortunate reassignment. It's not easy to design coverages that truly double a receiver, and rarely does it actually happen. Teams will often roll coverages towards a player, but a true 2-on-1 double team is pretty rare. The Panthers, for inexplicable reasons, consistently rolled coverage away from Julio all game. One of the few times they didn't came at the end of the first quarter. They're running a pretty standard cover 3 zone, but with 10 Falcons in the backfield, everybody is pressed to the line of scrimmage. Since Julio is the only threat, the post safety can cheat towards him and provide coverage over the top with linebackers in the intermediate areas. This is the type of help Panthers cornerbacks needed all game to guard Julio. Worley is one-on-one in man coverage, but instead of being on an island, he can just focus on any type of outbreaking route. If Julio goes inside or deep, Worley has help waiting. This is the Falcons' read concept. It's play action with max protection and just one receiver going out. It calls for Julio to run the read route at a slight angle straight at the safety, and at 20 yards, if that safety is flat-footed, he bursts past him and keeps running vertical. But if the safety is topping the route, he chops down back to the quarterback. Good receivers follow the principle everything is a vertical until it isn't. Julio commits his eyes, hips, and shoulders straight downfield and sees the safety flip his hips atop the route. Since Worley has that safety help, he can play more of a trail technique and doesn't need to worry about getting beat deep. Even with the two defenders, Julio snaps down his route so viciously, a well-timed throw could have hit big. But linebacker Luke Kuechly, who is using a robot technique to turn completely around to find the ball, drops into that window and takes away the converted read route. It's not always the plays that great receivers do make, it's often how they set up the next play on plays they don't. Let's focus on Julio's release against Worley. He's using a single release, where he comes to balance and head fakes to the opposite side he's releasing. This moves Worley outside just a step, but because he has all that support back inside, he's not worried. When we move just 2 plays later, the Panthers don't give Julio the same attention, and by leaving Worley one-on-one, allow one of, soon to be many, explosive plays. The Panthers are in cover 4 zone, 4 deep defenders guarding fourths or quarters of the field. Matt Ryan can be just about certain it's zone coverage with his tight end lined up outside and a cornerback matching him. The Falcons are running their under concept, a design switch release that has the wide tight end running a seam read route and the Z receiver running an under. Because cover 4 has an open middle of the field, the tight end can convert his seam read route to attack that open center. The Panthers try and fool Matt Ryan by faking a rotation to the middle of the field like it's cover 3. But when he comes back to the other safety, Ryan sees him gaining ground in his deep quarter, so he knows it's cover 4. He knows this safety is the key to the play. If he manipulates him with his eyes, Julio is one-on-one with no help over the top. Both safeties are aware of the tight end pressing up the seam and are very aware of the open middle of the field. So when Ryan looks back to that tight end who's starting to convert his route, this moves the safety away from the sideline, which is what Matty Ice's plan was all along. Once he sees movement, he immediately goes back to Julio, who has absolutely torched Worley. His release off the line of scrimmage to get this open is not by accident. Let's remember just 2 plays earlier when he gave a single release to the outside, then broke back in. Worley doesn't have the much needed help inside he had before. Julio gives him a hezzy double release, where first he hesitates to freeze Worley, who's already anticipating the single release he just saw. When Julio starts to single release and head fakes inside, Worley jumps inside to cut him off. A big no-no for cornerbacks is watching the receiver's eyes and head instead of their hips. Worley's caught looking at Julio's head, hands, and shoulders go out and out. But if you watch his hips, they point to where he's going the entire time. Julio anticipates Worley shooting his arm out after he's beat, so he uses a chop move to counter. Even though Worley's cooked, he isn't reacting like he's getting burned over the top. Because all of Julio's routes look like verticals, even the run back routes from the first play of the game, that's what Worley is waiting on. Until he realizes Julio is going vertical, it's way too late, and Julio makes an iconic over-the-shoulder catch. So, okay, after that first quarter, the Panthers said, we need to get Worley the hell out of here. It's time to stick veteran cornerback Bené Benwickery on Julio to slow him down. But spoiler alert, Benwickery got cut directly after this game. The Panthers continued to roll coverage away from Julio, which didn't give Benwickery any help over the top. And though here they tried to jam him at the line of scrimmage with linebacker Thomas Davis, Julio just speed released around him and was barely touched. Even though in the first play of the game, Benwickery was guarding the second receiver, Mohamed Sanu, on the other side of the field, he still had the run back route fresh in his mind. He also had a brain fart fresh in his mind and allowed a 60-yard bomb on 3rd and 17. At halftime, Julio had 107 yards, an impressive day if he had finished right then and there, but he was just getting started. The Panthers decided Benwickery should shadow him the rest of the game, which allowed Julio to continue manipulating him and make big plays. On this incompletion, Julio uses a double release. He starts inside, sells outside, then screams across the middle, using another chop to gain separation. Benwickery does a good job of staying close, but once again, he wasn't ready for what was coming next. Good receivers pair releases together, but great receivers vary the intensity of each of those releases. One play later, the Falcons call their dragon concept, which is mirrored slant flats to each side. The Panthers are showing blitz with 6 on the line of scrimmage, and when the tight end motions across and the safety follows, Matt Ryan knows it's most likely man coverage, and even if they drop a rat in the middle of the field, he has a long ways to go to gain enough depth to get into Julio's slant window. Usually, a slant releases inside the cornerback, and with Ben Wickery leveraged inside, he doesn't expect a slant after an outside release. Because the Panthers are blitzing an extra defender, there is no rat linebacker, so there's no help in the middle of the field. Julio immediately wins on his release and picks up 30 yards. He just used his double release, so how does he use that to manipulate Ben Wickery? He uses another hezzy single release, but this time more intense. At the snap, he hesitates to freeze Ben Wickery in place, then powerfully jabs his foot back inside. Ben Wickery bites on the single part of the move after the hezzy, then Julio uses a swipe swim move to knock away his hands and body. Once he stacks him, he doesn't immediately break inside on the slant even though he's already won. He presses upfield vertically to force Ben Wickery to commit straight ahead, then breaks inside. Heading into the fourth quarter, Julio is still pretty far away from 300 yards. With only 4 minutes remaining, he's sitting at 225. After a touchback, the Falcons start the drive on the 25-yard line, a perfect 75 yards away from the end zone. They're winning 34-26, and a touchdown seals the game. The Falcons motion their tight end, and seeing the linebacker follow him, Ryan knows the Panthers are in man coverage, and he's right. The Panthers are in cover 1 rat, but because the Falcons consistently operate out of heavier personnel and typically from running formations, the play action fake is deadly, and Kuechly the rat gets sucked up a bit too far from the middle of the field. Julio's running a slant or glance route and uses a hezzy single, kind of a skippy release, but now he's working the opposite side. He drives that plant leg hard into the ground, then explodes off of it. He gives Ben Wickery a little chop white move, and then socially distances. The Falcons went on to win 48-33, and after week 4, they kept up the pace. Julio finished the year with 1,400 yards, and Matt Ryan went on to win MVP. We all know what happened in the Super Bowl against the Patriots, but let's not minimize what it takes to get to the Super Bowl in the first place. Oftentimes, a special single-game performance like a 300-yarder can elevate and energize an entire team, raise their confidence, change the way opponents defend them, and make every other player step up and become stronger. A historically great offense has to consist of a powerful, demoralizing wide receiver threat, and Julio Jones is that and much more. At 31 years young, he and the Falcons are coming off a down year in 2019, but look to have a high-powered offense waiting in the wings. When his career is over and Canton comes calling, as he walks to the podium and his career accolades are read off, Week 4, 2016 will be at the top of the list. Julio Jones, 300 yards, 1 game. Thank you so much for watching this week's episode. If you liked it, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the bell if you want notifications for future content. I want to give a huge shout out to my Patreon subscribers. As we keep going and growing, you all have just really been the best. On our Patreon page, I offer my full library of college all-22 game film, which I know is really hard to get. We've got LSU, Oregon, Oklahoma, Utah, pretty much anybody you could want. So if you're interested in that, check out my Patreon page and you can get full access to all the good stuff. Let me know if you like the format of this episode, going back in time and whatnot, and if there are any other legendary performances you want to see broken down, just drop me a comment down below. I hope everybody is doing whatever they can to stay safe. So yeah, all right, until next Saturday, see ya.